loved him quietly for many years. Not the kind of love that demands attention, not the kind that asks to be noticed, just a soft, steady love that lived in the background of my life. I used to believe that if I stayed patient, he would one day see me. If I stayed kind, he would understand. If I stayed silent, love would somehow grow louder on its own. Every morning I woke before him. I made tea the way he liked it. Not too strong, not too sweet. I placed the cup near his hand without saying a word. He would drink it while reading the paper. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he didn't look up at all. I told myself that love does not need words, that real love lives in actions, that some people just show care differently. But there were moments when the house felt too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet. I would sit at the kitchen table listening to the clock tick. Each sound felt louder than my own thoughts, and in those moments, I wondered if I was slowly disappearing. He was not cruel. He never shouted. He never raised his hand or spoke harsh words. That almost made it harder. Because how do you complain about someone who is never openly unkind? How do you explain a pain that has no sharp edges? I smiled when others asked if I was happy. I said, yes, of course. And part of me believed it. But late at night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling. I wondered when love turned into habit, when care turned into routine, when being together started to feel like being alone. I stayed quiet because I thought love meant enduring. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I stayed quiet because I thought silence was strength. I did not realize that silence can also erase you, and by the time I noticed how invisible I had become, I was no longer sure how to speak at all. This is the story of how I loved him quietly, and what it cost me. We met in a simple way. No grand story, no dramatic beginning. He was introduced to me through family. People said he was a good man, quiet, hardworking, responsible. Those words mattered to me back then. I was young, but not careless. I did not dream of loud romance or big promises. I wanted stability, a home that felt safe, a life that felt steady. When we married, I believed we were choosing each other for the long road. The kind of love that grows slowly, the kind that lasts. In the early days, he spoke a little more. Not much, but enough. He asked if I had eaten. He reminded me to rest. Sometimes late at night, he would sit beside me and talk about work. I listened carefully. I always did. Our home was small, but it felt warm at first. I learned his routines quickly, what time he woke up, how he folded his clothes, where he liked to keep his shoes. I adjusted myself without thinking twice. I thought that was marriage. Every morning, I cleaned the house before the sun rose fully. The quiet hours felt peaceful then. The sound of sweeping, the soft clatter of dishes. I cooked the food he liked. Simple meals, nothing fancy, food that felt familiar. When he came home, I waited sometimes at the door, sometimes near the stove. He would nod, wash his hands, sit down. Food smells nice, he said once in a while. Those words stayed with me longer than they should have. We did not fight much. People envied that. They said, "You are lucky he is calm." I smiled and agreed, but calm can also be distant. As years passed, conversations became shorter. Not because of anger, just absence. He came home tired. I understood. I never asked too many questions. When he was quiet, I stayed quiet too. I told myself I was being supportive. I thought love meant giving space. Love meant not demanding. Love meant understanding without asking. Our days followed a pattern. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. Weekends passed without notice. Sometimes he went out with friends. Sometimes he stayed home, watching television. I sat nearby, folding clothes, knitting, waiting. I wanted to talk, many times. I wanted to ask him what he felt, if he was happy, if I mattered the way he mattered to me. But the words stayed inside. I feared disturbing the peace. My mother once asked me, "Does he take care of you?" I said, "Yes." And it was true, in a way. The bills were paid. The house was secure. There was no fear of survival. But there are other kinds of care. The kind that looks at you. The kind that listens. I did not know how to ask for that. As the years went on, I became good at reading silence. I could tell his mood by the way he closed the door, by how quickly he finished his meal. I shaped my day around his comfort. If he was tired, I stayed quiet. If he was distant, I stepped back. Slowly, without realizing it, I disappeared from my own life. I stopped sharing small things, a neighbor's story, a thought that crossed my mind, a worry that kept me awake. They felt unnecessary, unimportant. I told myself, he is not the talking type. He shows love differently. I repeated those sentences until they felt true. At family gatherings, he sat quietly while others spoke. I filled the gaps, answered questions, smiled for both of us. People praised my patience. They said I was a good wife. I felt proud and tired. At night, after the house fell asleep, I sometimes stood by the window. I watched the lights outside. I imagined conversations that never happened, not arguments, just warmth. I did not feel angry. That came much later. At that time, I only felt a soft ache, a gentle sadness that had no name. I still believed things would change. That one day he would notice how much I gave. That one day he would reach out first. I waited quietly, because that was how I loved. And I did not yet understand that waiting can slowly turn into losing yourself. The change did not arrive suddenly. It never does. It came quietly, the way dust settles on furniture, slow enough that you do not notice until the room feels heavy. At first, it was small things. He stopped asking how my day went, not that he had asked often before, but now, even the rare moments disappeared. I told myself it did not matter. We were adults, life was busy, but silence has weight, and I was the one carrying it. There were days when I did not speak a single sentence meant just for me. Words came out only as questions. Did you eat? Should I heat the food? Do you need anything? He answered with nods, sometimes with a short yes or no. I began to feel like part of the house, useful, present, unnoticed. When he came home late, I waited. Not because I had to, but because my heart did not rest until I heard the door. If he was early, I felt relief. If he was late, I felt foolish for waiting. One evening he walked in without looking at me, went straight to the room, changed clothes, sat down to eat. I stood near the stove holding the spoon. Is something wrong? I asked softly. He shrugged. Just tired. That was all. I swallowed the rest of my questions. Another time, I tried to share something small, a memory from childhood, a moment that made me smile. He listened for a few seconds, then picked up his phone. I stopped mid-sentence. He did not notice. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. Not angry, just hollow. I started to feel embarrassed by my need to talk, as if wanting connection was a flaw. So I spoke less. Weeks passed like this, then months. I filled my time with work around the house, cleaning things that were already clean, rearranging shelves, folding clothes slowly, carefully. I told myself I was being productive. But really, I was avoiding the quiet moments when thoughts became too loud. Family gatherings became harder, people laughed, couples talked, stories were shared. He sat beside me, silent as always. Someone once joked, "He must be tired of you after all these years." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside, something tightened. On the way home, I waited for him to say something, anything. He did not. Another silence settled between us. I began to notice how he spoke to others, at work events, with friends. His voice changed slightly, more alert, more present, not warm, but alive. I wondered what I lacked. Was I boring? Too quiet? Too available? I tried to change small things. I dressed differently, cooked new dishes. He noticed none of it. One evening, I made his favorite food. I set the table carefully, even lit a small candle. He ate quickly. "Why the candle?" he asked. I smiled. "No reason," he muttered and continued eating. I felt foolish for trying. I stopped making special efforts after that. Days began to blend together, morning light, afternoon chores, evening silence. Sometimes, when he slept, I watched his face. I searched for signs of the man I married. He looked peaceful, unbothered. I wondered if I was the only one feeling something missing. Once my sister visited. She stayed for tea. She watched us quietly. After he left the room, she asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Of course." She looked at me longer than necessary. "You don't talk much anymore?" she said gently. I smiled. I never did. But that was not true. I had learned to be quiet, not because I wanted to, but because it felt safer. I stopped expecting affection, stopped hoping for understanding. I told myself love does not always look the same. But late at night, when the house was still, questions returned. Is this what marriage is meant to be? Is this enough? Am I asking for too much? I never asked him these things. I was afraid of the answers. Then came the first real crack. It was a small disagreement about something simple, money. I mentioned a repair that needed to be done in the house. He sighed. "Why do you always bring these things up?" he said. The word always hurt more than I expected. "I just thought," I began. "We'll deal with it later," he cut in. His tone was sharp. Not loud, but firm. I went quiet. That night, he slept easily. I did not. I replayed the conversation again and again. I wondered when my voice became a burden. After that, his patience grew thinner. If I asked a question, he seemed annoyed. If I stayed silent, he seemed relieved. I did not know which version of myself he preferred, so I chose the one that took up the least space. I stopped asking for company, stopped suggesting outings. If he went out alone, I told him to enjoy. I meant it. But loneliness does not always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like acceptance. I began to feel invisible, even to myself. One evening, I fell ill. Nothing serious, just fever and weakness. I stayed in bed all day. He checked on me once. "Did you take medicine?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded and left the room. I stared at the ceiling. I realized something then. If I disappeared for a day, the house would still function. Meals could be ordered, clothes could wait. But if I disappeared for good, would he notice the silence the way I did? The thought scared me. I did not want grand gestures. I did not want speeches. I just wanted to be seen. Weeks later, another moment chipped away at me. We were at a family event. Someone asked how long we had been married. He answered correctly, then turned away. The person smiled at me and said, "You must be proud of how strong your marriage is." I smiled. Inside, I felt like a guest in my own story. That night, I finally spoke. Not loudly, not with anger. "I feel lonely," I said. He paused. "You're not alone," he replied. "I'm here, aren't I?" I nodded, but his words felt like a wall, solid, unmovable. I realized then that we were living two different versions of the same life. He saw peace, I felt absence, and neither of us knew how to reach the other. The silence grew thicker after that conversation. I regretted speaking. He acted as if nothing had happened. I returned to my quiet place, but something inside me had shifted. I could no longer pretend that endurance was love. I still stayed. I still cared. But a part of me had started to wake up. A part that asked questions I could not silence anymore. And that was when the distance between us stopped being just quiet and started becoming painful. The moment did not arrive with shouting. There was no slammed door, no raised voices. It came softly, almost politely. And that is why it hurt so deeply. It was an ordinary morning. Light filtered through the curtains. The kettle whistled the way it always did. I was setting cups on the table when he cleared his throat. "We need to talk," he said. Those words are never gentle, no matter how calmly they are spoken. I nodded and sat across from him. He looked tired, not angry, just distant. "I've been offered a transfer," he said. "Another city." I waited. They need an answer soon. I searched his face for something, anything. "When would we go?" I asked. He hesitated. "I would go first," he said. "Set things up." The word "we" did not come. I felt a small coldness in my chest. "And me?" I asked. He stared at his cup. "We'll see how things work out." That was when I understood. This was not about work. This was about space. Days passed in an uneasy calm. He began making plans without asking me. Phone calls, lists, quiet excitement he did not share. I moved around the house carefully, as if any wrong step might push him further away. One evening I asked, "Do you want me to come with you?" He did not answer right away. "It might be easier if I go alone," he said finally. "Easier for whom?" I did not ask. That night I cried silently into my pillow. Not because he was leaving, but because he was already gone. The house felt different after that. Larger, colder. I began to pack his things. Carefully, neatly. He thanked me. I wondered when love became something you thank someone for. A few days before his departure, his sister visited. She watched us quietly, like my own sister had done once. When he stepped out to take a call, she turned to me. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine," I replied. She studied me. "You know, he's not good with words," she said gently. I nodded. "He never has been." She hesitated. "There are things he doesn't say because he thinks they'll hurt you." That caught my attention. "What things?" I asked. She looked toward the door. "Just be patient," she said. But patience had been my only language for years. The day he left, the goodbye was short. "I'll call," he said. "I know," I replied. The door closed softly behind him. I stood there long after his footsteps faded. The first night alone was the hardest. The silence was louder than ever before. I expected sadness. What I did not expect was clarity. For the first time in years, I listened to myself, and I realized how tired I was. Days turned into weeks. His calls were brief, practical. "How are things?" "Fine." No stories, no sharing. I stopped waiting by the phone. I began to notice things about myself. How I enjoyed sitting by the window in the afternoon. How I liked walking slowly in the evening. I remembered parts of me that had been quiet for too long. One afternoon I found an old box while cleaning. Inside were letters, photos, small notes from the early years of our marriage. I read them slowly. He had never been expressive, but he had been present. He fixed things without being asked. He stayed up when I was sick. He listened more than he spoke. I wondered when that presence turned into absence. That evening, his sister called. "I should tell you something," she said. I sat down. "When he was younger," she began, "he learned to stay quiet to survive." I listened. "He grew up in a house where feelings were dangerous," she said. Silence kept the peace. The words settled slowly. "He loves you," she said, "but he doesn't know how to show it without feeling weak." I closed my eyes. Love that hides itself can feel a lot like indifference. That night, I thought deeply. About all the times I mistook silence for lack of care. About all the times he mistook endurance for happiness. I realized something painful. We were both afraid. Afraid to ask, afraid to need, afraid to change. The next day I called him. "I want to visit," I said. There was a pause. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes." When I arrived, he looked surprised to see me. The place was small, bare. He had set up his life efficiently, without warmth. We sat across from each other like strangers. "I've been thinking," I said. He waited. "I don't want to disappear from your life," I continued, "but I also don't want to be invisible in it." He looked down. "I never meant to make you feel that way," he said. "I know," I replied, "but intent doesn't erase impact." He was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. "I thought giving you peace meant giving you space," he said. "I didn't know you felt alone." I nodded. "And I thought loving you meant asking for nothing," I said. "I didn't know I was teaching you how to ignore me." The words hung between us. This was not a dramatic moment. No tears, no apologies, just truth. We talked for hours, slowly, carefully, about childhood, about fear, about all the words we never learned to see. He admitted he was scared of failing me, that he withdrew when he felt he couldn't give enough. I admitted I was scared of being too much, that I shrank myself to stay loved. By the end of the night, we were exhausted, but something had shifted, not fixed, but seen. When I returned home, I felt different. Not hopeful, not hopeless, just honest. I knew things could not return to what they were, but I also knew that silence was no longer an option. The turning point was not his transfer, not his leaving. It was the moment we both realized that love without presence becomes loneliness. And that realization changed everything. When I returned home after that visit, the house felt the same. The same furniture, the same quiet corners, but I was not the same. Something inside me had finally spoken out loud. And once a truth is spoken, it cannot be unheard. For the first few days, we did not rush into anything. No promises, no plans. We talked on the phone in a different way. He would tell me small things, what he ate, how the streets looked in the evening, what reminded him of home. I listened without filling the silence. I was learning something new. That silence can be shared, but it must never be one-sided. One evening he said quietly, "I miss you." He had never said that before. My chest tightened. "I miss you too," I replied, not because I needed to hear it, but because it was finally true on both sides. Weeks passed. He began to visit on weekends. The first visit felt awkward, like two people relearning how to sit in the same room. I did not rush to cook his favorite meals. I did not rearrange my day around him. I stayed myself, and he noticed. "You've changed," he said once. "Yes," I replied. "I had to." He nodded slowly. "I think I need to change too," he said. Change is not loud. It is made of small choices. He began to ask me things. "What do you want? How do you feel about this? Are you okay?" At first, my answers felt clumsy. I was not used to being asked, but I answered honestly. Sometimes the truth was uncomfortable. Sometimes it surprised even me. There were days we argued, quietly, not with anger, with confusion. Old habits tried to return. His silence, my shrinking. But now we noticed. When he pulled away, I said, "You're doing it again?" He would pause, breathe, and come back. When I felt myself disappearing, I said, "I need to be seen right now." And he listened. Not perfectly, but sincerely. One night, sitting at the kitchen table, he said something that stayed with me. "I didn't know love could feel this exposed," he said. I smiled sadly. "I didn't know it could feel this honest," I replied. We talked about the years behind us, not to blame, but to understand. He told me how providing, but to understand. He told me how providing felt like love to him, how staying quiet felt like protection. I told him how waiting felt like hope, how enduring felt like devotion. We both realized how easily love can get lost in translation. Slowly, decisions had to be made. He was offered a longer contract in the new city. "I don't want to decide without you," he said. That sentence alone felt like healing. We discussed everything. Pros, cons, fear. In the end, we chose something simple. We chose togetherness over convenience. He moved back, not because he was wrong to leave, but because we were no longer willing to live separate lives. The return was not dramatic. No big welcome, no speeches, just him setting his bag down in the familiar hallway. "I'm home," he said. And for the first time in years, it felt true. Life did not become perfect. There were still quiet days, still moments of misunderstanding, but now, quiet did not mean absence. One afternoon, while folding laundry, he reached for my hand. No words, just presence. I realized then that love does not always change its nature. Sometimes it just learns a new language. I stopped measuring love by volume. He stopped measuring it by sacrifice. We met in the middle. I began doing things for myself again, meeting friends, taking walks alone, laughing without explanation. He supported me, not loudly, but consistently. One evening I asked him, "Why didn't you ever say you loved me more?" He thought for a long moment. "I thought showing up was enough," he said. "I didn't know you needed to hear it too." I nodded. "And I didn't know I was allowed to need it," I replied. That was the quietest truth of all. We learned that love is not about endurance. It is about participation, not about staying, but about being present while staying. I stopped disappearing. He stopped assuming. And slowly, invisibility lost its power. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sky darken, he spoke softly. "I see you," he said. It was simple. almost casual, but it healed something deep inside me. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "And I see you too," I replied. That was our resolution. Not a perfect ending, but a shared beginning. These days our home is still quiet, but it is a different kind of quiet. It is not the silence that swallows you. It is the kind that lets you breathe. I wake up in the mornings without feeling like I need to prove anything. I make my tea slowly. I sit by the window and watch the light move across the room. He notices things now. The way I pause before speaking, the way I grow quiet when something hurts, the way my smile changes when I feel seen. And I notice him too. His efforts are not loud, they never were, but now they are shared. Sometimes we sit together without speaking at all, but this time, the silence belongs to both of us. I think about the years I spent believing love meant patience without limits, that caring meant shrinking, that staying quiet was the price of keeping someone close. I know better now. Love should not erase you. It should make room for you. I also learned that people do not always fail us on purpose. Sometimes they love us in the only way they know how. And sometimes that way is not enough. What matters is what happens when the truth is finally spoken. When I stopped hiding, I did not lose him. I found myself. And in that honesty, we found each other again. There are still moments when old fears return, moments when I wonder if silence will grow heavy again. But now I speak. Not to accuse, not to demand, just to be real. He listens, not perfectly, but with intention. That is what changed everything. If there is one thing this journey taught me, it is this. Love is not proven by how much you endure. It is proven by how much you are allowed to be. Being seen is not asking for too much. Being heard is not selfish. Being present is not a weakness. Tea is the foundation of real connection. If you are listening to this and feeling invisible in your own life, I want you to know something. Your feelings matter. Your voice matters. You do not have to disappear to be loved. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop being quiet. Not to fight, not to blame, but to exist fully. And when love is real, it will meet you there. That is the lesson I carry now. Not with regret, but with quiet strength. Because love should never make you feel unseen. It should remind you that you are already enough,